Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here today, and I feel very much filled up already, and with very interesting discussion. I'm afraid I'm not going to answer to your invitation in the sense that you thought it should be. I would like to talk a little on fetal size determines health. Is there a gap? And that is slightly different from circulation and all the nice themes that we have had this morning. I would be happy to maybe say a few words about gap. Once we sit down and start thinking, and then we identify something that is missing or something that we have to fill in. I think that is quite general for us, and it has been done before, for many years. And when I was a student, I was very lucky to get into contact with an old professor in it doesn't move here, but it moves there, okay? Who was active in Lund and was studying scriptures like this his entire life. And at those times they didn't talk about gaps, but it was about coherence and incoherence. Incoherence in British means it's ununderstandable, but means that coherence. And we are searching for this because we are living and we are trying to understand where we are on earth and our lives and our reality by concepts. So it has to be a smooth line, chain of thoughts, courses, if you like, and that. And if there is a gap, as we are discussing it today, or rather incoherence, as those people who were studying at that time, they repeat, and he told, when you see something in the next sentence that doesn't seem to follow from the previous one, that's exactly the moment when you have to really start to think, what is it? What is it that I didn't catch? Or is my concept totally wrong? And that's the kind of thing that we have to be in mind also when we are thinking about what we are doing today. We make a kind of concept and we try to understand reality by this concept. But sometimes we have a concept that makes us even blind to what actually reality is. So if we read this kind of thing and we don't realize that there is a drop and we still are in a chain of thoughts which is our own, maybe we are missing something very important. Well, that was just a few words on how to work with things, because those people, they were repeatedly working on the same their entire life. And they were quite good at it. This is the growth charts developed for the WHO, published a few years back. And that is much what we use today, even to predict cardiovascular diseases, because these are normal, very normal, recruited to be super normal in many ways, or what is said, predictive. And still we know that in this group there will be diseases when they grow old, because of all the wonderful things we heard earlier today. And I would then say that if we, has been during the last years, that we, by recruiting as uniformly well-fed or appropriately fed, with no risk factors, no diseases, with no nutritional problems, no economical problems, no environmental problems, then you don't get one uniform growth. And we have this idea that we will grow according to our genetic potential. Can anybody give me a weight for that potential? I've never seen that. But we all believe in it somehow when we use it, because that's beyond what we actually can understand. But this variation is what this kind of recruitment produces. It's not uniform. It's just as wide variation as it always has been. So then it comes to the question, how do we interpret these things? And I would then like to say that I would like to go to a small story first to make this clear. This is house sparrows. Now some people they have in Norway, they have studied them for 10 years, looking at them. And they nest and they put their eggs there, and then they produce these eggs. And then these people, they studied these eggs, and then they saw that they were not the same. Even in the same basket, in the same nest, there was a variation of the egg from the same bird. And the variation was quite something. It varies roughly the same magnitudes of variation as we see in human newborn weight. And so the body mass when they flew out from the nest shortly afterwards. And then they asked, why? How come? Is there any advantage in this? And there was. They had found out by observing them, and I'll take you through this. First, on this side, if there is no rain, and the temperature is, if there is rain, and there is a low temperature, 4 degrees, and rain, then you see that those smallest one has the highest mortality, and the biggest one has the lowest mortality. Makes sense. They put more on, there are more resources, they survive, they reproduce. Then, if they go to this scenario, then they see that if there is rain, if there is nice weather, the temperature is 16 degrees, then the mortality rate for those smaller one is less. And the mortality rate is bigger in the big ones. So it is an advantage to be small when the weather is fair and there is no rain. Then those fly well and do better. Interesting, isn't it? So what did those birds did? Well, they put egg at different sizes to like an insurance in a way, isn't it? Well, it was not them who had this idea. Evolution has made it the best surviving kit. Could it be that the humans do the same? We have been, even in the same family, we make babies of different sizes. And by all the variation that we have in sizes or in variation, we have been able to occupy this world literally everywhere.
Even in Norway.
Even in Norway. So, diversity. I think if we can afford at this group where everything was optimally, to make diversity, we make it. Those birds, they do have an adaptation component as well. In the early part of the season, when the weather is slightly cooler and more rain, and then in August when it is more dry, at average their eggs are smaller in August. but still with variation. And it's the same with us. So the other thing I think which is important for us to know is that diversity is something that we should appreciate as a normality with us. Normality, right? And the other one is, it's not uniform, the growth, but it's something about adaptation. In this group, we had 10 different populations from different countries, 10 different countries. Some were from India, they were smaller. And those who came from Scandinavia, they were bigger. I think it's an advantage in Norway to be bigger than me if you really want to have this cold weather and keep your temperature. But if I am living in south of India, it's good to be slim and to be able to work there and not to have too many kilos on. And that's what they do. So they adjust with it. So that's something that we have to take into mind. There are some gaps that I would like to discuss with you. This you've seen now, and I've had a fantastic introduction to this. Telling that the small ones in the normal population or in the population, they have a higher risk of cardiovascular diseases, yes. It's also quite obvious that it's not the weight that kills or produces this. And what we heard earlier today, when it's the very important difference between association, which this is a marker just in the causative link. And I think that has still to be kept in mind. And this for all this range, and I will not go further on this, but I would like to just point out one country which I would like to tease you a little with. These are the rough way of telling about how the population that are born in the world are concerning low birth weight. It's a combination of prematurity and small for gestational age. And this is not all countries, but most of them. EU average is the black one. OECD average is here. Finland is here, very low. And to make it more clear, Japan is here. One of the worst. They are producing very small babies. And does it work, this one? Sometimes it works, yes. In 1979, they have birth weight of 3,100 and somewhat. And in 2010, it has sunk to 3,020 or something.
How is it?
It goes down.
Induction of the
In Germany as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we
stopped measuring the umbilical cord.
Sorry?
We stopped measuring the weight of the umbilical cord, so they cut it short.
This is a huge concern to them. But, and they are thinking of why is it the weight gain during pregnancy, and this and that, and they agree, the Japanese agree that it's more than that.
But are these only normally born?
That's all.
That's all.
Yeah, the entire population.
If we induce 25% of
No, that's taken
They
care of.
changed from metal navel clips to plastic navel clips.
Yeah.
from metal to plastic.
Continue suggestions, please. The perinatal mortality can compete with any in the world. That's the development. So the smallness per se, because an average of 3,100 is very small even for Europeans. When we are born, we are in my country we are 3,600. But they are doing very well, aren't they?
5 per thousand.
The
The prenatal mortality is 5 per thousand, all included.
below,
Huh?
below.
It's very true.
That was in 2010.
Okay.
if you look at mortality for those small ones, because we think that if you have a low weight, you have a high risk of dying. It's probably true, but then I prefer to be low weight in Japan, because they have a very good. This is the ranking, so they have the lowest perinatal mortality for this group in the world. Is there a gap concerning this? Cardiovascular diseases, we discussed it. Well, if they have so small babies, they should have a very high risk of cardiovascular diseases. They have one of the very lowest in the world, cardiovascular diseases. We do understand it. Life expectancy, there is no one better. No one. What do they do wrong? Making a small babies and doesn't fit. Or rather, we have to think twice. We have to try to understand it. Peter Gluckman looked at this and then he said, ooh, this is going the wrong direction with these weights. There must be a danger for this population, according to the knowledge we have. Yes? But it doesn't fit with the reality of the Japanese, at least. And it's worthwhile to be studied, isn't it? Try to understand it and try to modify our own thoughts and be open-minded. Going back to this ultrasound study for gestational growth in fetuses from the WHO, this is the population that entered in. I want to make one small point of this. What kind of population is it? It was from India, it was from Europe, it was from South America, it was from Africa, it was from Egypt. And then you see the average parity, or is it 60%, was about to give birth to the first baby. And that's an average age of 28. What is it? With a cesarean section rate of 32 in that normal group, varying from 5.5 to 70. 70 was Brazil. What is it telling us? It's the kind of population you see in an industrialized, urbanized population. Be it in India, or in Egypt, or anywhere. That's what it is. Is that the norm we would like to have? When we are going to generalize what we find now for growth for the rest of the world? Is the urban life that we are conducting the optimal life that everybody should go into? Because if you see the projections nowadays, we are going to be more and more urbanized. Go to the paradise of the cities with the cars and the TVs and everything. And away from the farming, isn't it? Dangerous things there. To continue this is Ethiopia. Used to be one of the the poorest countries in the world, in the Rift Valley. This spot here is called Arsi. It's a small place. They are farmers. The women don't deliver the biggest babies in the world. They have an average of 17 point something small babies, below 2.5. They are working hard. The women, they are not telling that they are pregnant until everybody can see it, and then they admit it, and they continue to work hard. And when you go there and you look at where they are working, tidy farms, nice places, nice children, and they are today stigmatized because they have these too high, stunted babies. It's not the biggest babies they are born, giving birth to, but the fastest runners on earth. And they are not stupid. So the question is there a gap? I would say, if I would think, what do these people need? They are not high. There's some 160, they're not above 170, any of these. And they are not alone. What do they need? They had a nutrition, they have developed their nutrition for years and years and years and years and years. The roots of humankind we find in this country. And if they get some vaccines, if they get some antibiotics when they have an infection, if they can get help when they need it during labor, which is important, and they can have access to education and so on, maybe they would do nicely there. And it is sustainable. They don't have the epidemic of obesity or diabetes or asthma. Those people who are running to the city who have it. What we have studied with this study is not exercise. We had nutrition, but we didn't look at exercise, which we heard of previously today. And this study was actually on the board here earlier and says something about exercise, which is a very integrated part of our lives, but it is largely neglected. And when we try to do anything about it, it's going to the gym twice a week or something like that, and then we hope that helps. I'm not so sure. But doing this exercise, physical activity in a pregnancy as this was studied, makes a difference, and the insulin sensitivity isn't changed. It is worthwhile to pursue this kind of thing. I want to make another point, and that is on this difference here. There is a 3.5 to 4.5 difference in fetal sex. Surprise, surprise, we know that. In my country, women live longer. They go more commonly to the doctor. They are more commonly on sick leave. They are more commonly sick. And still they live longer. They're survivors. And we just had a meeting with the Ministry of Health concerning to improve healthcare systems for women, because that has not been studied in the same way as much of the studies we know they are made. And I think that's worthwhile to do so. But couldn't you turn it the other way around? Why is it that those who are getting smaller here are living longer? What makes them live longer, in spite of all this? I'll take you to this. The WHO study that we conducted, 140 of them were in Bergen, and we had the permission to do a sub-study on them, looking at the yolk sac. So we had the hypothesis, what we heard earlier today, this is an early pregnancy, it should be very important. And you start in the early days where you make fundamental settings of the intracellular activities, and then you gradually increase or you change the scope of the development to settle other things as the windows opens and close. So in the early pregnancy, before 12.5 weeks, we still have a yolk sac. And the yolk sac is small compared to what you have in the birds, but it's there. And we know it is producing stem cells and this and that, but it has nutritional function as well. We think so. At this stage, these fetuses or embryos are still depending on diffusion. And so if this has any nutritional importance, then we could make the hypothesis that if the mother has good bodily resources, she produces a good sizable yolk sac. So then we tested this hypothesis, and it was wrong. But the interesting thing is that by 140, or even it was only 121, we got an answer. And the answer was opposite. If you look at maternal weight, the higher the weight of the mother, the smaller was the diameter of the yolk sac. So it's quite the opposite. And if you look at the height, it was the same. It means we had to rethink, and we interpreted this the other way around then. Okay, it means that the yolk sac is involved somehow in growth of the embryo, but in the sense that it is compensating by getting bigger if the mother is short or thin. So if it has small bodily resources, then of course the diffusion area has to be a little bigger, and that means then you get a bigger yolk sac. Yes. We thought it was very interesting. Is there a difference between girls and boys at this stage? At those numbers, we never thought it should be possible, and it was. And this is just to tell that this effect we could see even into 24 weeks in the size of the baby. But the interesting is when you look at the female. BMI, weight and height we had, and then BMI, and then lean body mass and fat, all were had effect for the girls. But not the boys. They were more, they were 70, whereas the girls were only 51. None of them were. The boys had erratic distribution. The girls, they were strictly regulated. That is quality insurance, isn't it? And they continue with this quality insurance for the rest of their lives. It's biology, isn't it? And it's very interesting that it is possible even at this stage to have this. So I think there is good reason to study the differences that are between the sexes, because biology tells us it starts at the early stage, and they do have significance. This is a picture I sometimes put here. It is Michael Sova who has produced it. And it's about gap, actually. There is a disparity, or there is a reasons to think what is the message here and why. And it's possible to look at it more than once. Thank you.